Hello and welcome to the Surgical Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Al-hakim, the Third Eye Doctor. Pull up a chair and get ready for some candid and uncompromising discussion with experts, innovators, agitators, and influential people from every corner of health and well-being. From inside the hospital to at home in the kitchen, we're leaving no stone unturned in our quest to uncover the secrets of healthier, happier, more successful, and less stressful lives. Thank you so much for joining us, and without further ado, let's meet this episode's guest. Hello, Dr. Jeep. Hello, Vanessa.
Hello. So, Doc, what can we call you? Dr. Hakim? Can we call you late for dinner? Can we call you Hyder? What can we call you?
Yep, Hyder's absolutely fine. I get called Dr. Hakim all the time, and the shine has worn off so much. It's like, oh my God, here we go again. I've totally lost the kind of, shine of the whole doctor thing. It's become a bit of a bore now.
I hear you. So I'll call you Hyder.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I remember sort of when I first qualified as a doctor, it was the best thing ever, seeing the doctor in front of your name and, looking at your cards and people calling you doctor. It was a real, uplifting experience.
Yep.
Now I saw that you started in zoology.
Well, the way it is over here in the States, you can declare that you're going to be in a pre-medical track, but there is no degree for pre-medicine. So you have to declare usually a science major. And my dad, who was a doctor before me and still living at the age of 90, he was a zoology major as well. Of course, I never had a desire to be a zoologist. It was just a means to an end. And so because I majored in that, most of my courses were, botany, were in biology, chemistry, everything that I needed to take. So long time ago, I entered college in 1977 and finished in 1982 with a degree. A BS is what they call it, which means more than Bachelor of Science.
Yes.
So, and then I had several minors, but that was basically my way of getting my medical school requirements out of the way. So, yeah, that's how it all began.
Yeah, I mean, my dad's a zoologist as well. He did a PhD in marine biology, and I think he was interested in fishes. So he was really interested in, the whole aquatic life, and then he went back to Iraq and taught zoology and fish anatomy and fish biology and fisheries. So he was very much a zoologist, but I think he did want to become a doctor as well, and it didn't quite happen for him.
Yeah.
So I guess he lived his dream through me, which I'm really grateful for, because doing medicine is not easy, and there are many times when you feel like giving up, and my parents kept pushing me. So
myself as well. My dad was always my biggest fan. I reached that point several times, like, I don't think I'm going to make it. I'm not doing as well as I would like to do. And he would always be behind me saying, oh, you can do it. I know you can do it. And so he was always there for that along the, if you get knocked down off the horse, you just get right back up on it. And that's what he would say all the time. And it was very important to have that support for me. And I always knew if everybody was saying, oh, go ahead and do something else with your life, he would always be back there saying, no, this is what you wanted to do. I know you can do this. And I always knew I could hear that whenever I talked to him when I was down. So, yeah, I agree with you. That was very important. And I've been a doctor. He was a doctor. His dad was a doctor, and my brother, and now my godson and nephew is a doctor. So we're littered with medicine, littered not in a necessarily a good way, but it's just been something that has seemed to have been our calling.
I mean, has your opinion of medicine changed because you said that, littered not in a good way? What's changed?
Well, that's kind of why why Vanessa and I are doing what we're doing, because and Vanessa's equally as vocal about the situation that our occupation seems to be in. We're in a situation where medicine is run by corporations. It's run by insurance companies. It's run by regulatory agencies, and what we used to perceive as some authority in how we did our jobs and respect about our opinions, it's just not there to the extent that was there before. And so what has happened is there's a lot of stress that physicians endure, and because of that stress, they take it home, and their personal relationships are sometimes really, really desperately affected, which causes the breakup of their relationships, which is a monetary issue as well as a very personally destructive emotional issue. Go ahead, honey.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say I'm on the business side of medicine. When he was in practice, I'm an accountant by training, and so I did the business side, and it's very, very much now quantity over quality. And when it's an employed situation now, so it's no longer from a business point of view having independence, and so now there are bosses pushing, and you have large corporations pushing behind you, and it's not quite as fun as it used to be.
And when did you realize this was happening, Dr. G?
Oh, you know what, Hyder? I went into practice in I finished up my training completely in 1993. And when I started here in the U.S., we live in a pretty small town. I don't know what you would compare it to in England, but we live in an area of approximately 30,000 people, and around in West Virginia and around our area, there's small towns. And so my desire was to always come back after my training. We live, at least at that time, in a underserved area, and which Wheeling has kind of always been. And so I came back, and my desire was to be a what we call a small town family physician, where everybody knows who basically the town doctor is. And it was always my desire to be that town doctor, to make house calls, to give advice, to listen to problems, both psychologically, mentally, physically, and that's what I enjoyed doing initially. And I would say the insurance companies and the people that really are outside of what we do, I think that was starting to creep in. Oh gosh, I would say probably around 2000 is when we started to see it. Reimbursement was declining, and what you wanted to offer your employees. And we were, when we were in private practice, we were quite generous because it felt that it was the way it should be. This was not an undertaking to make a whole lot of money. This was an undertaking to have a comfortable lifestyle, but not to overdo it, but mainly for altruistic reasons. You get into medicine for a purpose higher than yourself. And it's something hopefully you understand before you do that. And that's the way Vanessa and I did it. I mean, we were a team back then and we're a team now, just in a different way. But I was on the medical end, she was on the business, and she was about the HR. She did that. She took care of, it seems like your worst problem is is with staff and fighting and all that. She took care of all that, but it just was, it was a labor of love in a lot of ways, and it was so enjoyable. And when the declining reimbursement happened, then we were kind of forced to become employed. And I know yours is, you have socialized medicine, and the government pays for everything unless you have private pay. Well, over here, private pay exists, but it's essentially everything is insurance. Government's involved with for low income and seniors, but the rest of it is from insurance companies. So basically, you are, for lack of a better word, you're a slave to what they want you to be paid with something. And so Vanessa took care of all that, but it got to be, where it wasn't sustainable for us to have what we were having in private practice. And so we ended up becoming employed by the hospital. And that's when you really start to notice where other people have their tentacles into your business and how you run things. So I would say 2000, 2004 is when we started seeing it, but it just has really escalated since then.
So, I mean, it was a sort of a financial decision to sort of go down the other route, the less independent route.
Yeah, and also I had our third child, and I worked constantly with our two before I had our last child, and lots of mommy guilt there, being just working all the time, and I, with the third, I just felt like I was going to be pulled in so many directions that I didn't want to go in that direction any longer.
There's just a flexibility that you have when
Right.
you're running your own practice. I mean, obviously you have to fulfill and follow governmental state regulations with things, but you have a flexibility to run things how you see fit. You lose that when you become an employee of a hospital system or something like that. And that's about when Vanessa stepped back.
And another thing is, you always think the grass is greener on the other side, right? And so it looked, to not think about having employee issues any longer, some other issues, knowing that the hospital was going to take care of all of that, not knowing that it was going to be so constraining that
I was going to say oppressive.
That's a good word.
Yeah, and it's like, oh no. So and then it was too late to go backwards.
I stayed in practice after Vanessa after she bowed out. And the best time that I think I ever had in practice was when she was running the office. We worked together every day. And I don't know, you may have some male friends who say, oh my God, I could never work with my wife. I never felt that way. We just had a very, we had a mutual interest in what we were doing, and that was to treat our employees the way they deserve to be treated. And she made, she made the tough decisions with staff when they had to be made, because I have not been very good at conflict, and so it fit really well. And the medical aspect, she never encroached on that unless it had something to do with a type of supply that I wanted to use that may have been a little bit more expensive than something else than else. But I would always say, honey, it may cost a little bit more, but I'm about quality rather than quantity. But those are the types of decisions that she would enlighten me about.
And it's about respect.
Yeah.
I respected his medical opinions. He respected my business opinions, and then we would negotiate and make decisions based on that. So, and that's really how our relationship has been, that intrinsic respect that we have for each other.
Yeah.
Has that always been there, or has that sort of developed over the long relationship, long time relationship that you've had?
I think it was something that was a value that was very important to us, and it was established at the very beginning of our relationship. I was previously married before Jeep, and I got married very young, of Italian descent, and it was strongly encouraged that I would marry and stay within my ethnic background and marry Italian. And I did. And unfortunately, there was alcoholism involved, and somebody that was unwilling to get help in any way, shape, or form. And so I had a hard decision to make. And I left that relationship. Fast forward, met Jeep, and pretty much knew that what I wanted in a husband. I kind of knew what I wanted in a husband because I didn't have it. And so when we met and things started getting serious, and we would talk about our wants and needs and desires as they were back at that time. And it just, we always were able and still are able to talk. Like, we can talk about so many different things. Like, a value that's important to me is intelligence, and that was super attractive. And the fact that I could just hold conversations about anything and everything, and he would educate me, and that's one of my top values.
Don't believe it, Hyder. I'm not that intelligent. But no.
Yeah, I mean, what was it in Vanessa that really attracted you at the time?
So many things. I'll just give you a little background. I told you, I'm from a medical background, and so my mom and dad married. It was I said, my dad, just a phenomenal physician. I've learned so much from him growing up, and how to practice medicine and put people first and do it right. But oftentimes that does not carry over well into a relationship. At least it didn't for him. And so he was very narcissistic with my mom. He devalued her importance around the house, and was like, well, I'm the doctor, and what you do is important, but it's not as important as what I would do. Or what I do. And so there'd be a lot of fighting, screaming, and it led to him on several occasions having affairs, most of which I didn't find out until I was probably in my early 20s. And so it was, my desire to do things differently, and knew that things could be done differently, came from when I was really aware of relationships, which is in my, and so I decided that when I got older that I was going to help other couples, because I had a knowledge that it could be done better. So enter my life Vanessa, and I too had been in a prior relationship, but it didn't reach marriage. It was an engagement that I fortunately got out of before the rings went on. But Vanessa was the type of person who she just had been beaten up by her prior relationship, didn't have a whole lot of self-worth, lot of insecurity because of that. And here I saw this wonderful person that had so much to offer, but in so many ways afraid to really be heard. And I felt like this is somebody that really meshed with me. And because I knew that I would give her that ability to grow that she was not given before. So there was a lot of I think attraction in being able to do that. And she thought the same way I did, and our hopes and dreams. And we already decided that she was going to be involved in my practice, and we were going to grow. And it has just done nothing, despite significant challenges over the years, but grow. And so here we are now. It will be in November 21st. We will have been married 31 years and together for 33. And very blessed and very lucky. And that has what has led us into working with healthcare professionals in their personal relationships in particular, because one thing, we're not taught how to do that, and a lot of us just don't know how to adjust to stress externally from our relationships, and when that enters our relationships. And so it's something that we think that we can and have successfully treated couples in our field how to do.
And just going back to when Vanessa decided to sort of step back, what was your initial thoughts and feelings about that? Did you sort of have resentment, or were you bitter about it, or
No, I was sad because I always knew that when she was involved with our practice that she had a vested interest. She wanted to do things the right way. For lack of a better word, she never did nor has done things half-ass. She was always about doing things the right way for the practice and for patients. I mean, she suffers from a chronic illness that would, that caused issues, and she would come in and see patients with me sometimes that were similarly afflicted. And Vanessa's never been the quote unquote doctor's wife. She's not been about dressing to the nines to come into the office and to show off a big expensive ring or jewelry. The jewelry that I bought her over the years, I have a tough time getting her to wear to begin with. So that's never been about that. So I was sad to see her go, because I knew that the practice was going to be in the hands of somebody that I was going to have to grow to trust and to do things the right way.
That's a great word, trust.
And nobody after that, nobody was nearly as good. And I would say to patients, I said, how have you seen me from a mood perspective? And because patients get to know you over the years, and they always said it seemed like you were so much happier when you were in private practice and Vanessa was involved, because they all my patients knew who she was. And we looked at our group that would work together as family. I mean, you're with them so many hours a day, and while that existed to an extent after she left, it was never the same.
Yeah. And how did you overcome the sadness, or are you still in a state of sadness?
Actually, I went back to school. And so I wanted to get my master's in business. And so with the birth of our son and in graduate school, my plate was full.
And so,
Definitely.
having her, when you come home from work, you unload basically. And so I always had somebody who understood, because she was involved with what was going on, and she understood what we as physicians go through, and other healthcare professionals for that matter go through on a daily basis, and the stresses. And so she was equally a part of things. And when she left, it's not that she still wasn't that way, but the understanding and how things were changing, it was more difficult. Of course, she was focused more on the kids, especially our son, who was our third that we had. So it was different. So it was I'm out of practice, at least for right now, and it's when at some point I think that I'm going to go back into it, but probably to a much less extent, because we're so focused on what we do right now. But she won't be involved in that. And it's just sadness is a good word, and how you deal with it, I think, is more adjusting.
That's right.
Than anything else. It's something that's never going to be the same. But the way I always kind of looked at it is I put patients first, because they deserve to be first, regardless of what's going on in your office or with you personally. They have to be first, and you, whatever's going on at home, you need to lay that at the door before you walk in. And then conversely, when you leave at the end of the day and you shut that door to your office, that needs to, it's always with us. It's part of what we do as healthcare professionals, but there's got to be some, for lack of a better word, not a wall, but there's got to be some
shedding the armor.
Right. It has to, most of it's got to be back there, so you can be present for not only your spouse or partner, but for your family, for your children, and dealing with that. And that's what we have found in our in the work that we do, is the biggest problem that healthcare professionals have in making a reasonable, making it a certain amount at home and some from work. There's just no teaching. We're trained, but are we trained to do that when we're in training? No, we're not. Good.
And what I say is that just going through the training of medicine can be dehumanizing, and we're taught to put everybody else first. And because of that, in order to treat really, life and death situations, you have to step outside yourself, and it's very hard to step back in. And so what I say is that just the training and the practice of medicine is dehumanizing, and we teach you how to be human again, especially with your partner.
Yeah. I mean, we'll come back to that. I wanted to ask you, as a physician, when you became an employee again, how did that change your way of practice as a physician?
Hyder, I always had a way of doing things, and I wasn't always adjusting to technology as it was changing, because technology isn't always as good as the way things were done before, as far as your therapeutics way of doing things. And so I continue to do things a lot the way my dad used to do things, and that always wasn't agreeable to the people that you were having to answer to. And it was, so that was a fight for me constantly.
Constant power struggle.
And
Can you give me an example of that? You know, a
like for
concrete example?
instance,
Yeah.
you know, I was somebody who I'd like to think I had a pretty astute knowledge of pharmacology and how drugs could be used differently in all manner of dysfunction, whether it was emotional, physical, a certain physical problem. And like, I'll give you, for instance, around here in our area, like now, it's July, but really certain months prior, March, April, lots of allergy around here. I mean, significant pollen. We just this valley, and also types of different bacteria that grow around here. So I would treat people usually yearly with a type of a cocktail that I would call it. And I would use a long acting and a short acting steroid with and then I would put an antihistamine in it that was injectable. Sometimes Benadryl, sometimes another one. And people would walk out the door and within a few days would say, "What did you put in that? Because I feel so much better." And they would feel so much better for the rest of the 3 or 4 months that this existed around here. And so it was something that I did, but I would get, "Well, why do you do that?" "I've never done that." I said, "Well, because this is how I was trained to do it this way." And other examples of how I would use, not necessarily off-label, but a medication that hadn't been used for a certain thing for over a long time. And I would say, "Well, it's still around, so I would use it." And it's like, well, we want to move on from how it was done, and we want you to do it this way. And I would say, so even if it was done better from how I was trained or how I was taught by my dad, well, no, I'm sorry, I want you to do it this way. And since I specifically went into family practice, I wasn't somebody who necessarily went by a time clock when I was with a patient. And, you know, I would give them time, and that's what I became known for. But, you know, the bean counters don't want that. You know, they want you to give people 5 or 10 minutes. Well, with me, 5 or 10 minutes was just seeing how they were, being present with them. And then you move on to finding out, okay, why are you here? Well, they want you to be done in that period of time and move on to somebody else. That was never me, still isn't me. And that was very frustrating.
And I'll give you another example is, you know, because I have the chronic illness I have, which is fibromyalgia, and I got it from having rheumatic fever when I was 11 years old. You know, he became really good at knowing the signs, symptoms, how to treat it. And what do you know? He's got a lot of patients coming in with fibromyalgia. The word got out because back then it was really an unknown. So, for example, I muscle ache at that time, you know, and he would use trigger point injections, did that a lot. You would never at this time in medicine, go to a family doc and get a trigger point injection. It just is not the standard anymore.
Or get injections, period. Really.
Yeah. So it's really gone from whatever he was comfortable doing, he was able to do, to now you've got to stay in a very small lane and then refer it out to whatever specialty. For example, that would be orthopedics. Correct?
Yeah, they didn't want you to look at medicine as an art, because it is an art. It's I was always trained that somebody comes in with a problem, if you can handle it, handle it. And if you're allowed to handle it, if the government or if the, whatever specialty board says you can do it, do it. And so I became what I felt like proficient in doing a lot of things. And if a problem was not getting better, I wasn't so foolish to keep hammering at it. And then I realized, okay, well, I'm going to send you to somebody who I know, who I'm comfortable with, who's going to treat you fairly and not blow you off. I'm going to send you to this person.
And in another incidence of him, using art in medicine is just not giving up when a patient's symptoms, when they kept coming back repeatedly and whatever he had been trying was not working, and he'd just scratch his head and think, this is a challenge and I'm going to research more of this and I'm going to figure out what is going on with them. So he also became known as that person. Like when you go to Dr. Naum, he's going to figure out what exactly your problem is. And it led to a lot of people being diagnosed with him being able to diagnose people that had gone to multiple doctors before him, and they were just pushed out the door.
He was never good enough for me to say, I can't help you.
Right.
In fact,
right.
I thought those words, I never understood why a physician would use that. But now it's commonplace. And I was never trained that way. So I would dig and I would order, I would research and say, okay, well, if you're not getting what you are looking for, then go and order this test or this blood work. And so I would do that. And sometimes it would take that to find out. But I can't tell you about having that attitude and what it would lead to with breakthroughs with different patients, people that just fell in the cracks. I was a fall in the crack type of guy because I wouldn't let it go until I figured it out. And then if I exhausted everything, then I would move on. And like Vanessa said, I became known for that. But you can't do that. You can't do that right now. The lab is, they're at the mercy of insurance companies that if they don't understand the sense in ordering a certain blood test, they're not going to pay for it. And so, yeah, I could go on and on about that, but I know we're kind of diverting from where we, from what we do. But yeah, that's the difference between, it seems to me, like being a physician then and having that ability when you're on your own, being able to have the flexibility to use what you learn and what your desire to do things not always in a mainstream way. Now it's not about the art, it's about doing cookie cutter. This is what the book says, do it the way the book says. Well, book's not always right, especially when you're dealing with real people.
Yeah, and outcomes have been studied for a period of time now, so they can just say, okay, if you think this is the diagnosis, then we know the outcome. So you do 1, 2, 3, and boom, it's staying in that channel.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
this
all-
whole concept around standardization has really
Yes.
caused a lot of harm for personality types who love that kind of freedom to express themselves,
Yeah.
artfully. And that was the thing that really troubled me studying medicine and going through, the whole training, is that you're put in a straitjacket, and that's the only way forward.
You
Yeah.
gave
And
us the language. Thank you. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
and then the straitjacket gets tighter and tighter and tighter until you go crazy, and then they call you crazy for being in the
Yes.
straitjacket.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And since, I mean, here it's, we don't have insurance companies, thankfully, but we do have regulation and best practices, so you can be sued for not following best practices. But these best practices are still not science. It's what's agreed upon by the most famous professors and physicians, and the ones with the tick box from the higher powers. And as you said, there are certain cocktails that just work, and we can't explain why it works, but it just does.
Yeah.
We can't explain these things,
No.
in a descriptive and systematic way.
But Hyder, it used to be you were given the respect to say, well, he knows what he's doing. It's worked before, but that's not good enough anymore. Even if you've done it all this way and it's worked, according to the quote unquote experts, that respect doesn't exist anymore. You're in that straitjacket that you so well put, and we're not like, you can't be Houdini. You can't get outside that straitjacket and do it outside that straitjacket, because then they get mad, or a malpractice lawyer is going to say, oh, well, you didn't do it exactly this way, and so you are now liable. So then there's that part that boxes you in as well over here.
Yeah,
So
and then sort of, unfortunately, going forward, we've got big tech companies like Google and Microsoft,
yes,
and sort of all these other people which are using, I would say, misinformation about, medical ways of doing things. And then
Yeah.
it's gonna, instead of before, you had to do systematic, randomized controlled trials, which we can all have access to and can, interrogate. Now it's all driven by artificial intelligence and misinformation. I mean, we saw what the pandemic did to us, and how,
My.
physicians were, what's the word? Yeah, cut out and silenced, because they had other evidence that actually, these other things worked, which went against the general narrative.
yeah. And that never happened before. And like with the pandemic, you had politics that was entering into it. And so you had
And
physicians
we were
on one
silenced.
side. Yes. You had physicians on one side of the political aisle and physicians on the other side of the political aisle. And they were basing their decisions according to what their political beliefs were. And I was horrified. Medicine is supposed to be independent of that kind of thinking, but it isn't. It's not anymore. And then you get patients looking at, according to what their political beliefs are, seeing what this doctor is saying, and whether it's a randomized trial, like you said, double blind, they don't care. It's according to what this doctor, who is of this political belief, is saying. So they're believing that. It's
Yeah, I mean, I've
horrifying.
actually stopped. I've actually stopped believing, in the science of medicine.
Isn't that horrible?
Yeah, yeah,
It's a
because
sad place
because
to
there's so
be.
much manipulation that goes
Yeah.
on, and we're obviously going to be in big trouble for saying these things. But whenever a representative of a pharmaceutical or a surgical company, I have big doubts about what,
Yeah.
about what they're doing, and the way that they're, unfortunately, and it's a big problem. And as you said, that creates great stress, and then we sort of go home, and we can't take off the armor. Why did you say that, Vanessa, that our training dehumanizes doctors?
The stuffing of emotions.
Right.
Definitely the stuffing of emotions. And I'll give you a perfect example. I would say the first 25 years of our marriage, I may have seen Jeep cry 5 times. And it was because, he would have patients around him. And he said, I couldn't fall apart. I couldn't fall apart because I was the one that everybody was looking to. And so when you do this time after time after time, it just becomes a way of life. It becomes a habit. So your habit is to stuff the feeling and just, go about the action. And then you're not feeling the humanity. You're not feeling that part of you.
We're not taught how to do that. And Vanessa will also say often that, we're taught not to be wrong about anything, that you are right. And
you're not allowed to be
not
wrong.
allowed. That's it.
You are
not allowed to be wrong. And so this perfection attitude that becomes pervasive in society about, doctors are supposed to be perfect, that when we make a mistake, it's something that is horrible, and that
it's horrible to admit to. And so when you're in relationship with another human being, you're going to be making mistakes all the time. So if you're going to work and you can't make a mistake, and you come home, there are folks that can't admit they have, make mistakes in their relationship because they're just not allowed to make a mistake. So they carry it in all parts of their life, and it just creates conflict.
She's right. It is very dehumanizing, right? Because, depending on what specialty you choose, and you're a surgeon, and so what call's about when you're on call and you get called in for a potential surgical case. And so you have to do that when you're at home, and obviously you're having a difficult time being present when you're knowing at any moment that you're going to be called by the emergency room, or a patient's going to go bad in the hospital that you may have to go in for. And so that creates an issue. And so that is very I would even, to coin a word, it's de-relationshipizing. And there's an expectation that the person that you're with needs to understand that. But at what point are you asking them to be understanding to where it's not fair for them to be that way anymore? Sure, that there should be an understanding when you get together. Okay, this is what I'm going to be doing with my life, and it's not going to be like it is for everyday people. But at some point, we need to know ourselves as healthcare professionals how not to have expectations that aren't fair. So what do you do with it? That takes an extraordinary amount of communication.
And still to this day, gender roles are still running rampant in marriages. For example, say there is the physician, and she's female, and say, for example, the husband isn't in medicine. And what we see is the female is still expected to go and do all of the work of a physician, and then come home and do all of the female gender roles in the household. And man, that's just
that happened with her. you know, when we started in practice, we had 2 kids, and so I would be at work, she would be at work, our kids were in daycare, and 4 o'clock she would leave. She would go pick up the kids. I would still be at the office. And at that time, I was going to 5 separate hospitals, building my practice, being on call for patients without physicians. And so I would leave the office and I would walk through the door, and I would be numb, you know, from everything that had happened that day. And so the only thing that I'm worried about is getting to a chair and turning on the television and getting immersed and lost, escaping from what had been going on that day, to kind of like just unload and decompress. And so she would be here. Her job's not stopped. You know, she's got 2 kids that are pawing at her.
And I worked all day too.
And she worked all day too. And she's making dinner. And, you know, I'm sitting in a chair oblivious to all this because I'm focused on myself. And I'm just not in, because I'm not paying attention. And, you know, after a while, she's like, hey, you know, this is not what I signed up for. This is not what you promised me.
This isn't fair.
You're an equal partner in raising these children.
Yeah.
As you said you were. You know, you wanted to have this many kids, and okay, we have this many kids, but you're kind of absent in parenting them and doing what needs to be done. And so this isn't something that we agreed on immediately. My dad was kind of a lot like me. He would walk in, pour a drink, and he let my mom do everything. He did something very rarely, and some of that was generational, but that's just the way he was. And so I started taking on that persona, which I never wanted to. And so we talked multiple times, and so what we ended up agreeing on is when I would come home, I would decompress for an hour or so, but then I would equally be involved in getting the kids fed, getting them ready for bed. And then when that was done, allowing Vanessa to unload on me what her day was. And it allowed me to be more present in my children's lives. Now looking back on it 30 years, that had she not have called me to account on that, I would have missed out on stuff that I would be regretting right now. But because she had that courage to confront me about it, I didn't. And so my relationship with my children is a lot better than it likely would have been.
And Vanessa, what gave you the courage to speak up and say enough is enough?
It took some time. Took a lot of time. There's that the resentment starts building, and I knew that it was affecting my relationship with him. And I had to get to a place where I wasn't afraid to bring it up to him, and that I was going to stand my ground. But like I said, this took some time, like several years. And finally just saying, I need help. It's not fair. I'm working just as hard as you are. Granted, you leave the office and you go to the hospital and you're doing that, but I'm picking up the kids, coming home, doing that. And just when you come through the door, I need help with them. Because there were 3 of them. So I was outnumbered. And it just fighting for what I needed, and I needed help.
Yeah, exactly. And she should have never had to have done that.
True.
But she would
I will
let it
say
go
that.
on, because she would say, she would think to herself, well, he's been through a lot, and so I'm not gonna guilt him. But like I said before, eventually your partner or your spouse gets to a point where, okay, I'm done feeling guilty. Got to start thinking about my wants, my needs, and what's fair. And unfortunately, we see with couples that because of a communication breakdown, the other spouse or partner never gets to the point where they can feel like they can speak up and talk about what's fair to them, because usually what's happened in the past, they're knocked down or it results in a argument, and after you argue about a specific topic or area and you're not getting anywhere, you just kind of drop it, but it doesn't go away. It just creates, Vanessa used the word resentment. Yeah. What does resentment do? It creates a wall, and that wall gets taller, and then you back away from that wall. You become distant from it, and so then
you're disconnected.
Communication breaks down. Frequency of intimacy and sex. Who wants to take someone, into bed and have a loving experience when it's not existing in the relationship outside of the bedroom? And so then that creates another wall in itself. And so things just start to gradually break down.
And it's insidious.
Oh, yes.
It's insidious, and it happens slowly over time. Of course, there are things, that can come into play that speed it up. But this, you don't see it happening, or I didn't see it happening on a daily basis. It was almost like I woke up and was like, wow, I really am harboring some big time resentment against him for this. And it was hard.
But I was determined, because of what I saw as a child and growing up, that I wasn't gonna allow that to happen with me. But it creeps in because it's a part of how you were raised, and it insidious, which is a really good word. It creeps in sometimes, and you don't realize you're speaking or acting in that way. It takes the courage of your spouse or partner to say, you're acting like your dad, and you said that you would never do that because you don't like the way he talked to your mom, because you thought that was awful, and you said you would never do that. But oftentimes in relationships, if somebody doesn't call you on that, it's going to continue. And there should be that kind of communication where you have that kind of courage without significant fear to be able to communicate like that. And that's one of the things that we do, is we bring couples to a point where that communication can happen without penalty. And that we teach couples to look at, okay, take this from their viewpoint. Don't feel offended, and look at it that they're bringing this up from a space of love in their heart. Humans can't always look at things that way. And oftentimes, it's a matter of practice.
Yeah. And just an attitude as well.
Yeah.
The team spirit. We're a team with these kids, and so we need to start acting. Take one for the team, so to speak. I need help here, and we started working as a team with the kids. We were really good at it with the practice. We weren't so good at it with the kids initially.
But it's
But we're, this is showing that we're not perfect. We're human. And, our marriage is not perfect. It never was perfect. It never will be perfect because we are imperfect human beings.
Right.
However, we work on it daily. We work on a relationship daily with the attitude of the team.
Exactly. And our kids have seen that. They see how we work through things, and they actually get nervous. And we have one out of the house now she'll be 30 years old and this year. And then we have another one who is 24, and then our son who's still in the house but in college. They get nervous when they see that there's distance between us, because they know that we've shown them of how to get through issues. In fact, our daughter is in psychology. She's a licensed clinical psychologist, and so she works with with people, and she doesn't like to see a problem that's existing, but we get through it. It may take some time, but we know that the foundation, which is love, respect for each other, that foundation does not get rattled. These other things that happen above the foundation of the house, like a broken window or the air conditioning is broken, and I use these metaphorically, those things can be dealt with as long as there is that love and that willingness to keep the relationship going. And we've had that from the beginning, but sometimes it takes some time, because we have our own wants and needs, and those things change over time. So there needs to be that adjustment. But again, as trite as it might sound, the communication is the key, and doing communication the right way, because you can communicate the wrong way, and sometimes bad communication is not is worse than no communication.
Yeah,
but that's the key.
And Vanessa, would you say that marrying a medic is is like a license for a really tough marriage, or does it depend on the personality?
Great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. I believe it was understanding that there would be some sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I grew up in a family business. And so in our family business, the attitude was whatever it takes. And the business always came first. So I kind of adapted with our marriage and Jeep being a doc, because I had that philosophy that I grew up with. But understanding that, wow, lay people that aren't in medicine just don't understand the sacrifice that it takes being married to a doc that spends so much time at work. And our kids, he was never home for dinner. Rare that he would be home for dinner. So we weren't the family that sat around the dinner table and had dinner together. And I knew that was a sacrifice. So what we did, we would go out to dinner a couple of times a week, later, of course, on the weekend, and have dinner out as a family. And that was how we adjusted to that. So it's knowing what the sacrifice is, and then finding a way of how you can work with that sacrifice.
Work takes on a life of its own, and it's knowing and having the courage to understand that, and being present outside of work. And it's what's a leviathan. it can be that way with work. And we don't know as physicians how to, and healthcare people, how to function. There's so many people that we talk to that say, well, no, I had one person I was talking to the other day, and she said, I've been through this twice, meaning marriage. And I don't plan on ever subjecting myself to this again. And so you hear that, and it's frustrating. And you would like to say, I've often said, well, give us a try. Because oftentimes people say that, but they say that because they're not equipped to be in a relationship, or they're dealing with somebody, at least at that time, that doesn't want to make an equal go of it.
Well, another thing is you have to be willing to recognize your own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because
you mean your own shit, basically.
Yes, I didn't want to say that, but yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's give and take. You can't, it's not one-sided. And if there's something that gets on my nerves with Jeep, I just run this through my head. Well, you're not perfect either, sister. So and that's just how I've coped with that.
And it's a different kind of thing now because we're both home at the same time.
And
we're older. When I was working, you're away from the house.
Yeah.
So we're not retirement, but at least for now, we're together all the time, and you don't realize how things might get on your nerves that otherwise aren't getting on your nerves. And so it's about dealing with that. As well. So we have a lot of things against us as healthcare people, and it's having self-awareness, because that's huge. Having self-awareness and in any kind of coaching, that's one of the tenets. But it's so important when you're dealing with relationships, because it takes you taking the time to be aware when you've got all this other stuff that you're dealing with. And too many times it's like, well, it is what it is. This is what I do. This is what I do for a living. And no, I can't make time for self-awareness, and I'm not going to. And so you have this relationship disintegration, which if you're taught tools how to prevent that from happening, it doesn't have to. And we've proven it with couples that that we've coached over time.
And Vanessa, what's great or magical about being married to a medic in your experience, apart from the hot sex and the great time in the bedroom?
Yes, anatomy, right? Anatomy 101.
Yes, and having a good knowledge of anatomy.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Oh gosh, for me, I would say I don't know how I would have been able to raise kids without him knowing medicine, because I would have freaked me out, like, oh my God, they're choking. No, they're not choking because they're breathing.
It's when they're not choking.
It's when they're not breathing that they're, the minute you hear a cough, oh my God, they're choking. No, they're not choking. So that helped me out tremendously.
I'll give you an example. We were in
That's
bed.
Not many, that just the kids. Keeping the kids alive. That's great.
Keeping the kids alive.
We were in bed one night, and our oldest had some sort of a viral illness, and she was laying in bed. Her temp was 105, and Vanessa's like, "Are you okay with this?" And I said, "Well, I'm keeping an eye on it." We were giving her anti-inflammatories, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to sit here now. If it goes to 106, I'm out the door right now, but give the medicine a chance to work." And sure enough, within the next 20 minutes or so, her fever broke and she was fine. Now, in something different, like she would say, oh, I would have been out the door, I'd have been calling 911. But
Yeah.
in being a physician, I've never been rattled by things. And that's just how I've done it. I stand up to what the issue is, I deal with it, and that's just the way I am. When I worked in the emergency room, situations that happened in the office, and I've been that way with her from a medical standpoint and my kids. And she's told me oftentimes, I would have been gone. Thank God you've been here.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's been absolutely awesome, and we can go on for another hour.
Yes.
Easily.
How best can people get hold of you and the work that you're doing with couples, a couple coaching and relationship coaching?
Our website is www.bestfriendsagain.com, and listeners can click on the free chapter to Dr. Jeep's book and get a free chapter. Also, it's over there.
Where is it?
Down further. Also, he wrote a book. Honey, go right.
That's in. Show him the way. Yeah.
I'll send you a copy of this, Hyder.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, here it
stop
is.
the wife from strangling me. Yeah.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
So the book, the website, and also LinkedIn. We have a very large LinkedIn presence, and Facebook as well.
And I would ask couples who are out there, because we understand this is personal stuff to talk to people about, and unfortunately we because of our training oftentimes are skeptical about things, and we have there's a lot of layers to our onion, and it's tough to get inside that outer layer sometimes and admit that we have a problem. But so many times couples have trusted us and have been so happy that they have. And we just would like couples out there who may be listening and thinking, understand that we all have issues, big and small, with our relationships. And if there's something going on and you really want to see a change, we can help you achieve that. But have the vulnerability to admit that there is an issue. And
think of us as educators, really.
Yes.
Teaching communication, teaching how to be in relationship with another human being, teaching how to own your own stuff, teaching how to be vulnerable, showing someone what real empathy and relationship looks like, teaching someone how to talk to their spouse about what their needs are, and having the spouse understand that and accept that lovingly, and just really looking at your relationship from a curiosity standpoint, and that getting to know each other more deeply. And how do you do that? You do that with questions and guidance. It's not we're not psychologists. This isn't therapy, and so couples don't sit in front of us and tell us what their last fight was about. That's not it at all. What we do is we teach a subject, and then there are questions. We teach our form of communication, and then there's if they have questions, and then we will use ourselves as examples.
That's the key. We use ourselves as an example. So people who are listening now, what you've heard from us in the vulnerable stories that we've told you regarding our relationship, you will hear that when you decide to work with us, because it is important. It definitely helps to establish communication, to know that what you might be going through, you're not alone. and that there are other people out there, and that you can get through that.
And another thing is the media is so good at putting out there what a relationship should look like, right? We're into the rom-coms and the romantic love stories and all of that, but what they're not showing what a healthy relationship looks like, and that there are stages of a relationship. You'll see the romance in the beginning of a relationship, but that does not last for an entire marriage, nor is it meant to.
Well, on that note, it's been awesome having you on the show, and looking forward to reading your book, and hopefully staying married.
Well,
Thank you.
it's been an absolute pleasure, Hyder.
Yeah.
You're a really good guy, and we've appreciated how you've moderated all this, and we've gotten to talk about a lot of things, and hopefully your listeners will benefit from what we've talked about.
And we must leave the last bit to Vanessa.
Yes.
Do you wanna sort of send us off and say goodbye to the listeners?
Yes, I'd like to, just thank everyone. Thank you for having us on. And don't be afraid. Reach out, give us a call. We have a link on the website where you can give us a call, and we'll be happy to talk to anyone.
Thanks a lot.